Good morning, everybody. You are listening to K-Talk Radio 1640 AM. This is the show, Utah Home Sweet Home. I am your host, Yoshi Shiraki. Today, we are going to be chatting about home inspections. If you have ever sold or purchased a home, you probably went through this experience. I've had clients in the past ask if it was necessary to have both sides, sellers asking me, do they have to allow home inspections to happen? I've had buyers ask, do I need to pay for a home inspection if I want to save the money? So we're going to go through what home inspectors do for you when you're a buyer. If you're listening as a seller, if you're thinking about selling your home or you're potentially selling your home, things that you'll know are going to happen during this home inspection. And basically, if you're here in the state of Utah and you're using the state-approved Utah purchase agreement that's been written by the state, it states in there that during your due diligence, a buyer is allowed to have anything that they need to do to, any types of inspections on the home that they feel is going to allow them to make the proper decision if they want to buy the home. And so, if you accept their offer and you've used the state-approved purchase agreement, then yes, you're going to need to allow your buyers to do a home inspection. Now, if you didn't use the state-approved purchase agreement, because there's a lot of contracts out there, a lot of investors will use their own written contracts or a contract written by an attorney, and in those cases, you want to look through it and determine if that's something that you're required to do or not do. Most likely, if a buyer is submitting an offer, they're going to have that contingency in there that they're going to be allowed to do home inspections. But if you're wondering what gets done during a home inspection, what does this inspector look for? What does he go through? Does he go up into the go up into the attic and down into the crawl space? Does he go through your closets? Does he go through your drawers? Does he go through, private belongings? You're going to find all of that information. We've got Neil Morris, who's going to be sharing all of that good insight. Neil Morris is with Win Inspection, so he'll be sharing what he does, what typical home inspectors do when they're doing this type of activity. And as a buyer, this is, I've had buyers ask me, do I need to spend the money to get a home inspection? I'd prefer to save the money. And you're not required to get a home inspection if you truly wanted to save the money, but it's probably a good idea to pay the minimal investment to have someone go in there and look at the things that you don't typically look at when you are shopping for a home. You're not going to poke your head up in the attic. You're not going to poke your head down into the crawl space. There's a lot of things that you're not going to be aware of unless maybe you have a solid construction background. So it's a good idea too. But before we dive in that, so I wanted to share some ideas. We've had in the past couple guests that we've had in the past couple weeks, guests that have come in that are high-performing athletes. We had J.R. Selski, who's a 3-time Olympian. That's a high-performing athlete. We had Tyrone Smith last week, who is the receiver for the University of Utah. July 4th, the 4th of July, if you want to start off your morning right and listen to K-Talk Radio, we have Jonathan Garcia, who's also an Olympian, who's going to be our guest. And one of the things that I like diving into is mindset, because if you're thinking about investing in real estate, we're Utah Home Sweet Home is primarily an entrepreneurial real estate show. We talk about business, we talk about real estate, we talk about buying and selling homes, flipping homes, apartment buildings. All our guests are in one way or another business owners, or winners in general. And the reason that we have these individuals coming in to share their mentality, this winner mentality, is because if you don't have a winning mentality, it's difficult to win no matter what you're pursuing in life. Whether you're an athlete, whether you're a wannabe entrepreneur, whether you are already an entrepreneur, whether you want to quit your 9-to-5 to pursue your passion, your mindset has to be right. And so that's why we have these winners come in, like Tyrone, like J.R. Selski, like Jonathan Garcia, and share how they were able to make their mind a winning mentality so that they could go out and perform at the most elite levels in competition. And there's also something, though, that's incredibly important alongside with mindset. You could have the best mindset. You could have your goal in mind. But if you don't have a roadmap, or in business, you probably heard the term a business plan. If you don't have a roadmap or a plan to get to your goal, the likelihood of you getting to your goal becomes drastically less. And if you do get to your goal, it typically takes drastically longer to get there without a map. So let me give you an example. If I had anyone who's listening to this right now get in a car and we started off in Toronto, Canada. Okay, let's imagine we're in Toronto, Canada right now. And I say, here's an address of my buddy's house who lives in Panama City, Panama. I'd like you to drive there from Toronto, Canada to Panama City. But you cannot use a road map. You can't use a GPS. You cannot use any form of map. You just have to figure it out, right? That's what you hear people say. I'm starting a business and I'm figuring it out. Can you imagine how long it would take to drive from Toronto, Canada to Panama City without a GPS, without a map, without any direction? You just had to get in your car and start driving south. Hopefully you know at least you need to go south versus north. Can you imagine how difficult it will be? And for those of you who, maybe aren't as great at geography and have any idea where Panama City is, let me break this down for you a little bit here. So if you got into your car in Toronto, I did this on Google Maps. So I pulled up the map and Google Maps gave me the road map on how to get to Panama City from Toronto, Canada, and the very first state, U.S. state, that you would enter from Canada to America would be Michigan. Okay, so from Toronto, Canada, you'd drive across the border, and then you would go into Michigan. Now, I'm not giving you the different cities in Michigan. I'm not telling you Detroit or wherever. This is just, you're going to have to figure out now from Michigan, the next state, right? So there's a lot of states and a lot of cities and a lot of towns in between each state. So from Toronto, Canada, you'd go to Michigan. From Michigan, then you're going to drive to Indiana. From Indiana, you're going to drive into Illinois. From Illinois, you will then drive to Missouri. From Missouri, you will then end up in Arkansas. From Arkansas, you'll end up in Texas. Okay, Texas is going to be the last state in the U.S. that you will drive through. Now, you still have to figure out how to get from Michigan to Indiana, right? You still have to figure out what's the best freeway. Hopefully you don't take a wrong turn. You start asking for advice from people who've never been down the path. I see this all the time in entrepreneur and real estate, where people will ask a friend, hey, what do you think I should do as far as starting up this business? They get a lot of ideas from a lot of friends who've never started a business or bought a piece of real estate, and a lot of the advice, not in, as far as like on purpose, but a lot of the advice is not good advice. And so, you're driving from Michigan to Indiana, you pull up to a gas station, you fill up some gas, you ask the gas station attendant, hey, listen, I'm trying to get to Illinois, can you give me some directions? Well, that person's never done the drive to Illinois, and so, how about this? You don't even know that Illinois, because without a map, you don't even know Illinois is the next state you're supposed to drive to. So maybe what you're telling the gas station attendant in Michigan is, hey, listen, I'm trying to get to Panama City. Tell me which direction I need to be going. Well, that gas station attendant says, you need to go south, so maybe you should take this freeway. So you jump on that freeway to find out it was the wrong freeway. It took you southeast instead of southwest. And now you're heading to, Florida, or you're heading to North Carolina, which is the wrong direction. And now you've driven 4 hours, 5 hours the wrong way to the next gas station for that gas station attendant to tell you, dude, you're on the wrong track. You're going to need to drive back. So now you've lost 4 hours going one way. You got to drive back 4 hours. So you lost 8 hours. You lost an entire day. That's a lot of people in entrepreneurship without a roadmap. They know their goal. They want to do this, whatever it may be. They want to start this business. They want this business to do this thing. But without a roadmap, they get a lot of bad advice and make a lot of wrong turns. Okay, so from Indiana now, you need to get to Illinois, to Missouri, to Arkansas, to Texas. Okay, now, the luxury of that part is at least everybody, for the most part, spoke English, because now you're going to enter Mexico. We're not even going to talk about the states and the cities you have to drive through, but somehow from Mexico, you then have to drive all through Mexico to Guatemala, completely different country. From Guatemala, then you have to drive all through Guatemala to figure out how to get to Panama City, which the next country is Honduras. From Honduras, then you're going to drive through El Salvador. From El Salvador, you're going to drive through Nicaragua. From Nicaragua, you're going to drive through Costa Rica. Costa Rica is the neighboring country to Panama. So now after Costa Rica, you will finally hit Panama. But now that you're in Panama, you still need to find the city of Panama City. And once you find the city of Panama City, without a road map, without a GPS, you've got to figure out where my buddy lives at this exact address. That's entrepreneurship without a road map. Is it possible? Sure. It's definitely possible. Me and Bailey could probably get in our car today, drive up to Toronto, Canada, or fly up to Toronto, Canada, rent a car, and we could probably eventually get to an address in Panama City. I speak a tiny bit of Spanish. Bailey, do you speak Spanish?
A little bit.
Bailey speaks a little Spanish. So, we might be able to make our way through South America with a little bit of Spanish and hope that we meet a lot of people that speak English along the way. But can you imagine how long this would take us to get from Toronto, Canada to Panama City without a GPS, without a road map? So, here's what's critical. You could have the proper mindset, which is a great start, because you need that. And we talk about mindset being like a muscle. If you don't work out mindset is like a muscle in that it just stays weak. If you don't work out a muscle, that muscle particularly stays weak. But if you work out a muscle, that muscle becomes stronger. So mindset's very, very similar, because if you just go on living life day to day, the natural way that you live, and you don't have any growth in your mindset, then you're probably not going to grow as an individual. I talk about being uncomfortable, because when people are uncomfortable, what's the first thing they typically do? They stop doing what they're doing that's making them uncomfortable. But if you were not uncomfortable today, if you were not uncomfortable in some form each and every day, you didn't grow that day, right? So as an athlete, if you didn't go out and train and get your heart pumping and lift, go and work out to where your muscles are aching and your heart's pounding and you're not uncomfortable, you probably didn't grow your physical fitness as an athlete that day, right? If you are a real estate investor who's starting out and you wanted to go out there and start finding your first deal, and I told you, you're going to need to door knock and you're going to need to cold call, and you procrastinate doing those things because they're uncomfortable, you didn't grow that day. Unless you find yourself doing activities each and every day that are uncomfortable, then you're probably not growing that day. So mindset as well as a roadmap are key to have the two things together to be able to reach success. So I wanted to share that because, again, we've been having some high-performing winners, athletes coming in as guests, and they've been sharing their mindset, but I also wanted to share that you need to complement your mindset growth with a roadmap. So figure out what it is, figure out where you want to be, where you want to go, what's your goal, and now you've got to figure out, research, call people that who have already been down this road, somebody who's already driven a car from Toronto to Panama City, for example. That would be the person to call, not some gas station attendant who's never done the drive. Call mentors to see the fastest, quickest way. Okay, so wanted to get that out there really quickly here, but now we're going to dive into some home inspection stuff. Neil, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joshi. Glad to be here.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so I've had clients that have asked me, do I really need to get a home inspection? It's X amount of dollars, and I want to save that money to buy some new light fixtures for the house that we're going to buy, right? And the answer technically is no, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But I always advise them that it's a good idea, and I share with them some resources if they still have doubt or questions, and then they basically can make their own decision, at which point every single one said, yeah, you're right, it is a good idea. So if you don't mind, can you start off by simply discussing why someone should get a home inspection?
Sure. So first off, when you're buying a house, there are unexpected expenses, it's an expensive process, and it is hard to say, I'm going to spend a few $100s more, do a home inspection, possibly do some extra tests on the house. The obvious answer is where this is for most of us the biggest investment we ever make. You want to protect your investment, you want to make a good decision. But it's important to understand too, just what is a home inspection and what is the benefit.
Right.
So first off, the home inspection, you're paying someone who has a lot of experience to go through the house in a methodical way, checking a lot of different things that you won't even think to check about. And even if you have a father-in-law who's a contractor, they're not going to think about all of the things that your trained home inspector is going to.
Right.
So we're going through that house and we're going to find as much as we can to make you aware of. We're not looking to talk you out of buying a house. We just want you to be educated about the house you're buying, understand what expenses you're going to have in the future, what things need to be repaired now. Now obviously, when we do a home inspection, we find things that nobody knew about, and it very frequently results in cost savings. As a matter of fact, I would guess, and I don't have numbers to prove it, but I would guess at least 60% of home buyers end up saving what they paid in the home inspection when it comes down to getting repairs done before they close,
Good point.
or consideration cost.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And, you know, to add on to that, Neil, as you know, I fix and flip houses, and a lot of the time these houses that we buy, a lot of the houses I buy sight unseen. I don't get access to them, but I'll close on them, own them, and then I still get a home inspection because I still want to know what I just bought. So I think it's a great idea, period, before, after. You know, in my case, it's sometimes after. In most cases, it's before, but I would say sometimes it's after, just because there's a lot of things, like you said, that I just wouldn't even know to look through to know if there's something wrong, and I want to fix that before I flip it to the next person as I'm remodeling the home.
Right, right. And, you know, sometimes, yesterday was a perfect example. I had one house that was immaculate. There was almost nothing that I could find to let the seller know, here's something you'll be fixing. You know, there were a couple of little things, and that was great, not the seller, the buyer.
Yeah.
So the buyer was thrilled, and it was all good. I had another house where the list went on and on and on of the things that we found that they probably are going to need to completely renegotiate, because there's about $20,000 in work that is immediate, needing to be done.
Right. Got it. Okay, so now a buyer decides they want to get a home inspection. Most buyers that are working with agents will usually have a referral of a home inspector. But let's just say those buyers out there that either one, are not working with an agent, or two, like the interview process as far as something that they want to, know who they're hiring. And so they're gonna. I've worked with some buyers that are like, do you have any good home inspectors that you would recommend? I said yes. I said, but however, if you have somebody that you want to use, you don't have to use who I use. At which point they said, well, we just kind of want to get a feel for different home inspection companies. Smart, it's like shopping for a service. They want to see what other people offer. If you could advise somebody, the top 3 questions they should ask a home inspector when they're looking to hire one, to know they're hiring someone good, what would you say those are?
It's a really good question, because Utah is one of the handful of states that don't regulate home inspection at all. So Yoshi, if you wanted to print up a business card, you could start inspecting homes tomorrow.
Interesting. I'd heard that.
Yeah. So the first thing that I think is going to be important is experience. There's no substitute for experience, and everyone has to start somewhere. I understand that, but boy, I keep learning. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've inspected about 10,000 houses.
Wow.
And there's still new things to pick up. So just how many inspections has this inspector completed? That's a great question. If they've done a lot of inspections, then I'm going to be more comfortable with them.
Got it.
Another one is a certification. Since Utah doesn't regulate home inspection, I think it's important that this home inspector has gone through some kind of a stringent certification process. And there are some certifications that really aren't credible, but there are some that definitely are, and I feel like the most credible is the American Society of Home Inspectors.
Got it.
They have a website, ashi.org, ashi.org. But to be an ASHI certified inspector, first you can't even qualify until you've completed over 250 home inspections, and then there is a really difficult test you have to be able to pass, and then you have annual continuing education classes that you've got to keep up with to maintain your certification. And another reason for having someone who's affiliated with a certification or a national certifying program is that our inspection then has to meet or exceed the standards that they set. So I've seen where some home inspectors will have a 2-page document at the end of their inspection, and maybe even handwritten, where we are required to cover a whole list of things, and it's very specified what is included in a home inspection and what we have to do to accomplish that. And then thirdly, what would be my third? I would say word of mouth and reputation.
Got it.
Your realtor, sometimes people are a little bit hesitant to go with their realtor's recommendation because they're afraid the realtor is trying to push somebody who's just going to say the house is great.
Oh, sure.
But, you know, those of us who have been in the business a while know that's just not, we don't have any reason to do that, because the worst thing in the world is when somebody is upset because they got into a house that they're not happy with.
Exactly.
So you don't want your client to get into a house and then find a whole bunch of surprises and be angry with you.
Absolutely.
And I likewise don't. So you know, your realtor really is going to be looking out for you, and
great.
I would trust that.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, perfect. So it was probably 2 or 3 years ago when I first learned that here in the state of Utah, home inspectors weren't regulated, and anyone could just become a home inspector, like I could become one today. Bailey, you want to be a home inspector?
Yes.
Bailey's a home inspector as of today. His number is, if you guys need it. And it was surprising to hear that these people, that they didn't have to go like a real estate agent. We have to go through school, and so I started asking, me personally, when I started working with newer home inspectors, if they had any type of background. What do you find? And I found a lot of them had construction background. They knew their way in and out of homes, and these were inspectors that I started working with based off of friends that referred, and I realized that most of them had some type of contracting background. Is that what you're finding as well in this industry, or just literally?
You know what? There really is a big mix.
Okay.
There are those. It lends well to people who have a building background. I think the learning curve is quicker if you've been involved in construction. The home inspection is really so broad that someone who has been an electrician or a framer or a plumber, they've just got one piece of it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, not that I compare myself to a doctor, but maybe a house doctor.
Sure.
You're a generalist, and so you have to have a broad understanding of everything.
Yes.
But really not a specialty in anything.
Got it.
So anyone can be trained to be a home inspector, but training is key.
Gotcha.
Win Home Inspection, which is what I'm affiliated with, we're a national company, and so we have mandatory training for any inspectors who come on board, and company certification.
Got it.
Before then the national certifications even come into play. So yeah, you can be trained to become a home inspector. There is a long learning curve, and like I say, experience counts for everything.
Yeah.
I think back to when I first started, and I'm grateful people gave me a chance, but I've learned an awful lot since then.
Yeah, and I think that's with anything, right? Like, it's the doctor who's doing his very, very first surgery, right? Experience, you start to weigh, like, okay, is this guy experienced, not experienced? And we all have to start somewhere. But what was his training, right? Was his training YouTube? Or did he go to medical school, right? And so training's so key. I don't know if you know this, I don't think we've ever talked about this, but in a previous career for 20 years, I used to be a hairstylist to the stars in New York City.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so Anderson Cooper was one of my clients. I would go to his house, I'd go to the CNN office, I'd cut his hair. But I remember the day that I did my very first haircut, right, in my whole entire life. And so, yeah, you got to start somewhere. But I was given a great opportunity in a great salon in New York City because my training that I had gone to, which was out in London, England, was considered one of the best hair schools in the world at the time. That training built credibility for me to get my start, and so I was, but it was still scary to do, your very first haircut on. It was a woman, and you don't want to make anybody mad. That's for sure. So I think if my first haircut would have been on a dude, dudes don't care as much as women. In my experience over 19 years in cutting hair, dudes just want their hair shorter.
Obviously, looking at me.
Yeah, it's just long. I need a haircut, make it shorter. Where I find women want it to look good too, right? And so when you're first starting, you're like, oh man, this is a challenge. I can make it shorter, but hopefully I make it good too. So you've got a nightmare story that you're going to share with us here. And so I like to preset the nightmare story because the nightmare story isn't about hearing about someone's bad experience. It's about learning from a nightmare story. The story happened already. I've got lots of nightmare stories personally as a real estate investor. And I would say that those scenarios were the scenarios that I learned the most in my career of fixing and flipping and buying rentals. So I like hearing the nightmare story and the lesson that can be learned from it because I prefer to learn from somebody else's past mistakes if possible. So do you mind diving into the nightmare story that you have ready to share with us?
Yeah, you had asked me about that. I did not come up with a story that involves my mistake, and so maybe I'll have to think about that.
Well, it doesn't have to be yours.
Because I've certainly made mistakes. But a potential nightmare that I was planning to share.
Yes.
I was in a house just a couple of months ago, and the electrical was acting a little bit funny. Now, part of the home inspection, we always take off the electric panel covers and we look at the breakers and the wiring configuration inside the panel. And when I pulled off the panel, it was like a little bolt of lightning running inside the panel.
Oh my gosh.
I had my infrared camera there with me, and I held that up, and we were at almost 600 degrees on the breaker in that panel. So
Whoa.
This was a fire just about to happen at any time.
Holy cow.
So that was a potential nightmare averted.
Yeah.
Now something more from the realm of nightmares. I had a house that I was inspecting in Cottonwood, and it had a basement apartment, and there was this hoarder hermit guy living in the basement apartment, and I went down there, and I just had to follow little trails through all his piles of things, so it was really hard to even inspect the place. But I got into the kitchen, and there was a strong musty smell down there.
Got it.
Basements sometimes have it. Got into the kitchen, and I could see that half of the kitchen was just kind of dark and not in use at all. And as the closer I got, I realized the entire half of the kitchen was not just covered in mold, but deep mold. To where
Oh my gosh.
I opened kitchen cupboards and you couldn't put anything in there because it was solid mold that had
No
filled
way.
in. I'd never seen anything like it. And the funny thing was I put it in the report, of course.
Sure.
The owner of the place called me just furious, saying, "You have no business saying there's mold in that place. I've owned it for this many years and we've never had a problem with it." I said, "You haven't been in the basement." He said, "Well, no, but he would have told me if there was a problem." So after he finally went back to the basement, he called me back and apologized.
Oh wow.
And then, another one, Brent, who works with me, had an experience where somebody had a slab, a basement slab, or not a basement, a slab on grade house, meaning a
Okay.
house that's built on a concrete slab.
Yeah.
And somebody thought it was a good idea to dig a basement underneath it.
Oh.
And so,
Oh no.
so underneath this
Oh.
concrete slab, which isn't reinforced by, it was an old slab. A newer one would be stronger, but even still not intended to have hollow space underneath.
Right.
And so in this case, this was a house that would have probably caved in eventually.
Oh my gosh.
And then I had another house in Salt Lake near the Capitol, old historic home that looked really cool, and so I was excited about it. I got in the attic, and somehow the rafters had all broken, and the whole roof had shifted.
Oh my gosh.
To where it was just kind of resting in place, but nothing was tying it on, and it was not in its original position.
Whoa! Wow, that's crazy. Was the house that was on slab? Did that end up caving down?
Well, the buyers backed out. And
okay.
I don't know the rest of the story. We give the report to the realtor, and the sellers hopefully they gave it to the sellers and said, you probably need to do something about this.
Right. How big was this hole that they'd already started digging?
It was largely under the entire
Holy cow.
house.
Wow.
It hadn't cracked and broken yet, but it would.
Yeah.
It would eventually, and the floor would just cave right in.
Oh my gosh. Because there was a house, I want to say 2018 or early 2019 in South Salt Lake that caved in. Did you hear about that?
No, I don't recall.
It was on KSL. It made the rounds through all my real estate investor friends. I think it was on KUTV or KSL. Did the news story on it, and then someone posted it, and then it got shared amongst all of us. And same thing. It was a flip. Investor bought it and was digging out the basement. And I don't know the whole story, but the house fell down. And luckily, no one was in it. It fell down overnight. I guess it just weakened the home, the structure to a point, and then it caved down.
We do a lot of inspecting in old houses, and so you have a lot of these old houses that have a shallow foundation, never intended to have a basement.
Right.
And so people want a basement. They'll dig out the middle, and this is why you have a shelf basement sometimes, because you have to leave enough soil around the perimeter to support the original foundation. If you dig away too close to the original foundation, then absolutely. And that's something we find quite often with old houses, is when people have compromised the foundation by digging the basement too close to the original foundation.
Gotcha. So is every shelf basement then, just random curious question, I don't know a ton about construction as far as like why someone would do a shelf basement other than what you just said. Is every shelf basement because somebody essentially wanted to make a basement, or was that a thing in the day to have a shelf basement?
Well, a lot of times you had a cellar under a house where they would dig out somewhere not too close to the foundation.
Okay.
But then in many cases they expanded that to make a larger basement.
Oh, sure.
Which is okay, that you've got one or more central beams going under the floors, that if you're digging out, removing the soil, of course you've got to put new posts in to support the inner structure.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be done. But then, yes, as you move toward as you spread toward the foundation, you've got to leave enough soil, and then put some kind of a retaining wall to hold up the soil so that you don't jeopardize the original footings and foundation. And that's another mistake that we see a lot, is people dig away, but then it's just raw soil, where if you had a sprinkler break or a pipe burst that could erode the soil away, then it could very quickly compromise your foundation.
Wow. That house alone that you just talked about is all I need to hear. Like, if I was someone wondering, do I need a home inspection? That story right there is all I would need. I'm going to start telling that story. Yeah, excellent. Well, it's time for a commercial break. When we come back, we are going to be dissecting more questions and asking Neil all sorts of stuff, like kind of what happens through the step-by-step of a home inspection. We'll also be asking him, about other things that people get inspected. You hear about people testing for meth, radon, etc. So we'll be diving into that. So you're not going to want to go anywhere, because meth is a pretty big topic that's scary for a lot of people, and a lot of people test, a lot of people don't. So I'm going to want to hear your opinion on like what you find the ratio is of do's and don'ts as far as people that do it. And so you're going to want to hear what Neil has to say when we get back from a commercial break. So stay tuned. With smartphones and technology making life a little easier, the Snap Leash has also been designed to make life a little easier for you and your pup. Whether you're out on a stroll in the park or possibly a walk through the city, or maybe even a hike up in the mountains, the Snap Leash is the perfect leash for you. The Snap Leash can easily and conveniently convert into 7 types of leashes, making the Snap Leash the most convenient leash in the world. What other leash do you know that is 7 leashes in one? With the Snap Leash having appearances on the Today Show in New York City, TV 47 in Dallas, Texas, and ABC 4 on Midday, Utah, you are definitely going to want to take a peek at what the Snap Leash can do for you and your best friend. Make life a little easier for you and your pup, and visit www.snapleash.com today. All right, we are back. This is the show, K-Talk. This is the show, Utah Home Sweet Home. This is the station, K-Talk Radio 1640 AM. Our very special guest is Neil Morris. I'm Yoshi Shiraki, and we are talking about home inspections today, the importance of them, what goes, kind of what goes down when one gets done. So, Neil, if you don't mind walking us through, kind of typically, what happens when you arrive at a home to perform a home inspection?
Sure. So typically, the buyer is going to meet me when I'm finished with the home inspection. Some want to come and be there and watch what I'm doing, which is fine, but more often than not they get bored or they distract me. So what I do when I get there is, first off, I'll set up an office, typically in the kitchen. I bring the computer. We like to write the report on site.
That's great.
And so invariably there are so many things to check and test, and when you go home and then write the report, you got to think, oh no, I don't remember.
Right.
But if I'm there at the house, so whenever possible I like to write the report while I'm working. So I'll get my office set up. Then I'm going around, I'll typically start on the exterior. I'm going around with the camera in hand, and I'll take a lot of pictures so I know what things I want to note in the report.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get up on the roof first, usually, and on the roof I'll take a lot of pictures. I'm looking for the age of the roof, how much time I think is left in the roof cover, how many layers of shingles there are up there. I'm looking hopefully to find leaks if there are any. Now, leaks are a hard thing to find in a roof.
Got it.
Oftentimes you can't see. Sometimes it's obvious.
Right.
Horror story, sorry, back to what could have been a horror story. I had a brand new construction. Builders sometimes are really not happy about our coming in and doing a home inspection. And
sure.
maybe they've had bad experiences, I don't know. My take on it is, if you're buying a brand new house that has just been built, you've got all these different subs who have come in to do the work, and a builder, no matter how good the builder is, it's possible to miss things or not notice things. So I had a builder who was actually quite hostile and really didn't even want to let me do the inspection. At the end of the day, when I was up on the roof, it was a fancy architectural roof. There was an entire section that you couldn't see from the ground that had been completely skipped.
Oh man.
Bare wood, just not even,
Wow.
Nobody knew it hadn't been finished. So obviously things like that we're looking for on the roof, and whenever we can get actually on the roof, then we're going to do it. Now, wintertime, a little bit harder. As a matter of fact, sadly, we had a buyer just 2 or 3 weeks ago who had major water damage in their kitchen ceiling. We'd done the inspection, unfortunately, during winter, and there were about 5 inches of snow on the roof. You couldn't get up there, you couldn't see anything, and all we can do is say, look, the best you can do is ask the seller in this case. But anyways, most of the time, even in winter, most of the time, we're able to get on the roof. And so that's really telling, and there usually are going to be things we find, not necessarily scary things, sometimes yes, but just maintenance things to make people aware of.
Got it.
Roofs just really get neglected.
Right.
Because we don't go on the roof very often.
Sure.
Looking at the rain gutters, coming around the house, looking at the siding, whatever the material is, looking for anything that needs to be fixed, any breaches where water or pests are going to enter the house.
Oh, sure.
Looking for signs of settling. We, like I mentioned earlier, we do, when I say we, there's Brent and me with the Sandy Win Home Inspection franchise. We also have Mark in Kaysville who has the Win Home Inspection franchise too.
Got it.
So we'll go around the foundation. We're looking for cracks. A lot of people get paranoid about cracks, and some cracking is normal, and especially with older houses, and
Sure.
we'll explain that. We'll look for signs of settling, which also is quite common on older houses, and we'll talk through that in the report and with the seller buyer face to face.
Right.
We test the sprinkler system. Now that's not part of the national inspection standard, and most inspectors won't test a sprinkler system.
Got it.
But in Utah, you want to know that the sprinkler system works.
Right.
So we'll do an on-off test.
Oh, cool.
And just make sure that it's working. And if we can't get it working, we'll say in the report, hey, you ought to ask the seller about this. Then we'll get into if there's a garage, whether it's attached or detached. We'll check it out structurally. We'll look at if it has electrical. We'll look at the door opener and the mechanics there. The fire safety between the garage and the house. Then we're going to go through the house. Typically we'll start at the top, we'll go in the attic. We're looking at the underside of the roof to see if there's anything that maybe wasn't apparent when we were on the roof, such as damaged
Right.
sheathing, water damage,
Right.
broken trusses or rafters. Of course, we want to make sure there's plenty of insulation up there.
Right.
Surprisingly, there are more times than you would think that we get up in the attic and there's either no insulation or there's a whole area that never got insulated.
Interesting.
And you lose 70% of your heat through the ceilings, and
Wow.
a lot more if you
Yeah.
don't have insulation. So anyway, after the attic, then we're going to just go through the house top to bottom, every room. We're going to check the doors, windows, electrical outlets. We're looking for signs of water leaking in around windows, looking at ceilings. We're going into the bathrooms, checking all the bathroom fixtures. We run the water for a long time during the course of the home inspection.
Oh, that makes sense.
So just this week I had a house in the basement. I ran the bathtub, bathroom sink, there was a kitchen in the basement, ran the kitchen sink and flushed the toilet several times. And after running the water for quite a while, I noticed water coming out from under the wall behind the bathroom.
Oh, wow.
And it's something that probably the current owner had never experienced because they weren't running that much water. But it doesn't matter how much water you run, that shouldn't happen.
Right, right.
So that's the kind of thing we hope to find.
Got it.
We can't say we'll always find that sort of thing.
What was it? What
You
created that?
I haven't heard. It had to be a problem with the drain
Okay.
system, and I suspect there might have been a drain vent, a plumbing vent in the
Yeah.
wall. They have a type that can be done indoors.
Yeah.
A plumbing vent, they typically go up through the rooftop, but there's a type that can be done inside the walls. And I'm guessing that plumbing vent maybe was leaking, and with that much water coming in, it was just leaking out the top.
Gotcha.
So hopefully they've got it fixed by now.
Yeah.
But so we're trying to find that. Another big issue that people run into is a bad sewer line. When the house is sitting vacant and you run a little bit of water, it's hard to get enough water
Yes.
through there to notice a problem. Or if maybe a single person was living in the house
Sure.
and not using as much water, and then a whole family moves in and
Good
they're
point.
running a lot of water, flushing a lot of things, and suddenly that sewer line that they didn't realize had some problems starts backing up. So that's why we try to run a lot of water. We won't always catch that, and
Yeah.
for your protection, there's always the sewer line scope
Right.
that will help to look at that. We're checking the HVAC, so running the furnace.
Uh-huh.
We'll let the furnace run for a while, looking to make sure we've got airflow everywhere in the house. We do a carbon monoxide test to make sure that your furnace isn't putting carbon monoxide into the breathing air. We're also doing a carbon monoxide test at the furnace
Got it.
equipment to make sure that it's not leaking there through the exhaust system. Checking the water heater, we're noting the date. Water heaters are famous for failure, and so we want to let you know how old your water heater is, so you've got an idea of what you can expect.
Right.
Looking for, we have a lot of houses with basements in Utah, and if you have a house with a basement, eventually it's going to leak somewhere.
Right.
So looking for signs of leaking, any water damage, and and we'll do our best to point that out as well. We, as I mentioned earlier, take off the electric panel covers and look at the breakers and the wiring configuration. You have a lot of do-it-yourself people who will get into there and do their own electrical, and so
Yeah.
so we find some things that have to be corrected
Right.
quite often.
Got it. Very cool. Interesting. I had fixed and flipped a home. My plumber installed a brand new bathtub upstairs, and had told me he was going to come back the next day to connect it. This particular section of the basement wasn't finished, so he could just come in and connect it, and ended up forgetting. And I just thought it was done. And I can't remember if it was either the home inspection or a buyer just happened to turn on the tub upstairs to kind of, I don't know, turn it on. But somebody turned on the water, and then I ended up getting a call from a realtor saying, hey, I just want you to know your carpet downstairs is soggy. I was like, it is? So I, of course, go over there, and it's completely soaked in this little particular section, because it kind of came out of the area that was unfinished. That was okay, because that was unfinished, right? But then it came into to the carpet area, and I look up, and sure enough, the tub just drains straight down like a shower, right?
Wow.
And there was no plumbing connected, so I had to call the plumber, and he's like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to go back.
Well, that could have been so much worse if
Yeah.
you finished the basement.
Yeah. It probably was a realtor. It probably was a buyer, because if it would have been a home inspector, would have left it on for a long time. I would have had a flooded basement.
You know what? Bathtubs we will run for quite a while.
Yeah.
And we'll typically work our way from the top down, because we're running water throughout the whole house. If it's leaking somewhere, if it's collecting something, we're going to find it below.
Right.
But probably a good lesson to don't wait too long before you go down to the basement while you've got the water.
Right. Because you're inspecting my house.
Yeah. Actually, I had another one just recently, similar situation. Somebody had flipped a house, and the plumber forgot to connect the drain pipe to the washing machine drain connection. So you have these little box connectors in the wall that have it's a little box station in the laundry wall that has your water supply and your drain hole.
Yeah.
Well, you stick something in that drain hole and it's just draining into the wall. There was no drain there.
Oh, no.
So these kinds of things happen, and that's...
Yeah. Nightmare story. There's the lesson to be learned from the nightmare story. Okay, perfect. So can you share a little bit about your thoughts on these kind of extra things that people could invest in as far as inspecting? Like you talked about the sewer scope a minute ago, meth test, radon test, these kind of extra inspections that one could pay for if they wanted to go further with the home inspection. Do you mind sharing a little bit, do you think it's a good idea? It's 50-50, you see a lot of radon, you don't see a lot of radon, you see a ton of meth, you don't see a ton of meth. What are your kind of thoughts on that? So
we talked right at the start about the fact that this whole process is expensive, and so I'm aware that a lot of people are scraping what they've got to get into a house, and then you start throwing all these tests at them that are additional money because they involve lab fees, they involve specialized equipment and extra time. And so I will recommend some of these when I think it's necessary, but I won't push them too hard. However, I'm not going to talk you out of doing a test either. So when we're talking about these tests, I'll hit randomly. First off, you mentioned meth. Methamphetamine is a drug that leaves a residue when people cook it or when they use it.
Got it.
So when we do a meth test, we're taking surface samples in the home that go to a lab for analysis to see if there's methamphetamine residue in the house. And so many people are shocked when we find a positive. The test is sensitive and it's going to pick it up even if your teenage kid used or had a friend over who used in the house. It's going to show up. Now fortunately, there is a scale that helps us determine is cleanup necessary or not.
Got it.
And so sometimes you'll find a trace in the house and it doesn't mean the house is unsafe or that cleaning needs to happen. But sometimes we'll find a lot. I was doing a rental unit for an investor not long ago, and I told him we really should do a methamphetamine test here, because I know it's going to test positive. Sometimes you've been around enough of these to know when it's going to happen, and he was hesitant, but sure enough, it tested very high.
Got it.
Needed some major cleanup.
Gotcha.
That would have been a lot of expense to him.
Got it.
So methamphetamine, with us, it's going to add $125 to the cost of the inspection, but if it does test positive and high enough that cleanup is required, that can be quite expensive.
Yeah.
Radon is one that is becoming more and more popular among buyers. Radon is a radioactive gas that's emitted from the soil, and it is coming up from the soil all around us all the time. But it dissipates fairly well, and it has a low shelf life.
Got it.
Or a short shelf life. So it's mostly a concern in basements. Now sometimes we encounter high radon levels above grade, but usually it's the basement where it's being pushed up from the soil, and people are living in basements, sleeping in basements, and not knowing that they're breathing radon all the time. And it's the second leading cause of lung cancer, and does damage your lungs in a similar way to smoking does.
Gotcha.
So when we test for radon, we put a monitor in the house. It has to stay for 48 hours, and we come back and get it, and then we have immediately a result that tells us whether or not a mitigation system should be installed, which will cost $1,000 to $1,500 typically, if that has to be done. So that's one that if you're buying a house with a basement and you're going to spend a lot of time in the basement, I'd recommend it.
Wonderful, wonderful, excellent. Well, Neil, we're already out of time, if you can believe that. Yes. Okay. We'll have to have you back to kind of share about the sewer scope, because that's one that I really believe in as well, and would love to hear your thoughts on that. But I want to make sure that people know how to get in touch with you. How can people find you?
So we're on the web, as I mentioned. Win Home Inspection is a national company.
Okay.
My personal website is Sandy, because I own the Sandy franchise for Win Home Inspection.
Nice.
Sandy.Winnie, which is Win International. Win came from World Inspection Network, so it's Win International, so WINI.com. Sandy.winnie.com.
Perfect.
You can book an inspection online, you can see demos and see what our inspection report looks like, and get a lot of information there.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Neil, thank you so much for coming in and sharing. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. If you missed any part of the show, you can also check out our website at utahhomesweethome.com. We've got the social media links at the bottom. You can click on the YouTube. We film these shows so that if you are a visual person, you can definitely check those videos out as well. And I hope everybody has a spectacular rest of the day.